a speech.
Probably could have been what George McClellan was not in terms of political ambition.
Pretty much. So,
So he
he
couldn't
does.
resist.
Yeah, he makes that press tour, and he does some interview questions later. For example, he went on to say, "The president of the United States ordered me to break through the Japanese lines for the purpose, as I understand it, of organizing the American offensive against Japan, a primary object of which is the relief of the Philippines." So MacArthur went in front of the press tour and just bullshitted them and said that the United States government was seeking to liberate the Philippines, which was not the stance of the White House nor the American military for that matter. And this would cause, as most people who know the Pacific War, this whole divide where there's this MacArthur way and then there's, you could call it the Nimitz way of winning the war. And MacArthur,
It's just
yeah,
it's just a miracle. At least he had one. He got along with two Navy admirals, I guess, in Thomas Kincaid
yeah,
and Halsey.
of course,
Though
it's
I think
America.
with Halsey, it kind of tapered off to the end, right?
Yes, of course.
Especially
Well, because
after
they both became
Leyte
so
Gulf.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
MacArthur, he assumed he would be in charge of the relief of the Philippines, and he assumed that that would be the primary objective of, the path to defeating Japan, which he's just kind of in his own world there. He would also spend the remainder of the war fighting a two-front battle that Gaurav has alluded to. One was, of course, against the Japanese, and the other one was against the U.S. Navy, uh, who he referred to as the Navy Cabal. And yeah, he would arguably fight the U.S. Navy with more fervor than against the Japanese.
Yeah, at least not as intensely as the battle between the IJA and IJN.
Yeah, you can't beat that one. That's a rivalry that's legendary. I have to
Yeah, but I
probably we
think,
should do a standalone episode on that one too. I could do something.
and we can also maybe expand it to Axis because the
Yeah,
Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine did not like each other as well.
of course. Yeah.
Donitz and uh, Goring hated each other, but MacArthur's biggest fear with the Navy was he felt they will take command of America's strategic initiative and maneuvers, and the army is going to be relegated to a training role, whereas the Marines are going to become the premier infantry arm.
Yeah, I don't, and I mean, as we all know, the Pacific is ground; it's flat land, and there's no need for transportation, amphibious assaults, and such. So, yeah, of course, MacArthur is like, what an. Anyways, I have to
But
stop
everywhere
shitting on
else, it's
MacArthur.
Marines.
Yeah, oh, of
I
course, he
mean,
needs
all
the
Call
Marines.
of Duties, right?
Yeah. So, having devoted enough time to bashing on MacArthur, let's get back into the action. As I mentioned earlier, MacArthur's departure from Corregidor coincided with a significant kind of lull in the fighting because, General Homa was reorganizing his forces, giving them rest. Meanwhile, MacArthur's War Plan Orange blunder left General Wainwright's troops in a hopeless predicament. Did not help that some of Batan's food reserves had been transferred to Corregidor by MacArthur. MacArthur's flight to Australia likely did not
And
bolster
some
morale.
of a very small amount of food.
Yeah. And of course, watching your general just flee the Philippines, that's not going to boost morale for the guys defending Batan and Corregidor. Although Wainwright's immediate arrival, going to the front lines, did improve relations between the Army and naval personnel, because as you can imagine, MacArthur was blaming the Navy guys for everything left, right, and center. To kind of give the Japanese perspective, when Hideki Tojo read the report on General MacArthur's escape, he was enraged. It seemed this might have been, the final straw for our poor friend General Homa. Tojo instructed his secretary, Colonel Susumu Nishihara, to communicate his concerns about the situation in Bataan. Nishihara presented the issue to Colonel Takushiro Hattori, the chief of operations and his longtime friend. Colonel Hattori had arrived, recently with the 4th Division from Shanghai. After researching the Bataan situation, Hattori concluded that Mount Samat, a rugged hill, actually, let me pull up right over here. So if you can kind of see this middle area and just picture that this is all coalescing into a giant mountain. Yeah. So this entire area in the middle is it's deemed not passable in the middle part, but its slopes on the outer parts you can bypass a little bit. As you can see with the red arrows, you can see it's kind of going on the outskirts of it. It is passable on the sides. And yeah, this is going to come up soon. But Mount Samat was a rugged hill rising about nearly 2,000 feet. It's located just behind the center of the defenders' front lines at this point. They deemed it to be a weak point that they should target. Capturing this position would likely lead to the crumbling of the entire defensive line for the Allies. An effective artillery and aerial bombardment in advance would prepare the way for an all-out infantry assault on this vulnerable spot. Encouraged by Nishihara, Hattori convinced General Sugiyama to approve this strategy, which was subsequently presented to General Homa. At first glance, he was deeply satisfied with the proposal, believing that this was, the solution to his ongoing troubles. And to be honest, I'm sure Homa was grasping at straws at this point, pulling out his hair. What little hair he actually had. I think he was kind of bald at that point. But the Imperial Japanese Navy supplied a fresh squadron of Zeros and 24 Betty bombers to Bataan, while the Imperial Japanese Army dispatched 60 Sally bombers. By the end of March, approximately 67,100 Japanese troops, 80 bombers, and 140 artillery pieces were assembled to unleash devastation upon Bataan. And let's consider this. This is literally an area that could, what's the saying, be left to wither on the grapevine, as they used to say in the ancient times. You could just siege them, starve them out. There was no need to actually do any of this, really. They probably should have just sieged this and used these troops for, the other campaigns.
And you could have easily bottled them up with max 20,000 troops. Because 67,000 troops is what? A little over 4 divisions worth. Because if I'm not mistaken, there was
about 15.
34,
Yeah, it's about 4.
About 15,000, roughly.
Yep.
And if I'm not mistaken, there was also like the 34th Mixed Independent Brigade that was also operating here.
Mm-hmm.
That can explain why it's 67,000. But yeah, you could have easily dispatched 30 to 40,000 troops to other theaters, especially like the Dutch East Indies, or return them to the China front.
Yeah, exactly. There's much more critical areas. This is really, this entire thing is quite silly, to be honest, from all points of view. It's like, it's not just General Homa's fault. Like, yes, he's not doing a great job of taking Bataan, but at the second time, it should be a secondary target.
I think it's Japanese doctrine also to don't want to starve them out. You want to annihilate the enemy.
Yeah. As I won't get into it, this is an issue with the China War. Really, really is.